All right, IBUS students, coming to you from the Sunshine Coast once again. Beautiful Gibsons. It's a lovely sunny day. I'm hoping to look at the moon again tonight and work in my lunar observation program. Last night I had a lovely barbecue in the backyard with the family. It was really nice. Now I am armed with a cup of coffee and I am good to go. So we're going to get into topic number 6, choosing an entry strategy. And for some of you that have had IBUS 321, you'll go, wait a minute, we've already covered this. Yes, but I think it would be a poor program if every course was completely separate and not connected with the others. Something would definitely be wrong. So what we've got here is a situation where if you've taken 321 or you plan to take it in the future, then you've got this very exhaustive look at entry-level strategies. But we have to talk about it here because Peak Performance Pontoons wants to move into the global markets. How do they do it? And that's the entry strategy concept. So this connects, but I think hopefully I'll be looking at the legal aspect of it a little bit more than just the business aspects of it. All right, so there's two ways that you can enter. One is a passive entry and the other is an active entry. A passive entry is when you get contacted by a business from another country or you wind up doing it sort of inadvertently. An active one is where you actively seek out customers in foreign jurisdictions or seek out outsourcing opportunities. Again, another anecdote. I was talking to the Chamber of Commerce one time in North Vancouver, and you do these things for free, but they say, okay, you get to make a plug for your law firm. Okay, so I was explaining the law that I did corporate commercial law, that I did succession planning and estate planning, and I do trademarks and copyrights. And I was listing them off, and my business manager, who was sitting beside me, slipped over a piece of paper and it said, and I do international business law. So being a good employee of hers, I said, and I do international business law. Then after I finished my presentation, I sat down and I said, why did you ask me to say that? And she said, well, she was going through the list of our clients and putting them into categories, which you have to do for the Law Society. Anyway, she said, I realized that you had sort of an eclectic practice. I had clients from all over the world. I was doing contest promotional work for 7-Eleven out of Dallas, Texas. I had clients in Hong Kong. I had clients in Malta. I had to get a map and find out where Malta was. I had a client in the UK. I had clients in Ontario. And so suddenly I realized, yeah, I do have clients everywhere, and yeah, I do international business. But obviously mine was a passive entry because I didn't say, okay, I'm going to seek out international business opportunities. So that's a passive entry. Peak Performance Pontoons has really begun their global strategy in a passive manner. We got contacted by Good Day Mate, river rafting, seeking out a business relationship, and we had that one small sale in Washington State, and so suddenly you go, oh wait, the global markets or the markets in British Columbia are shrinking. Because we've pretty much covered the bases there, so we have to go cross-border. Active entry, that's what the strategy of the business is now. We're actively looking at outsourcing our products to Mexico. We're actively looking at entering into a distribution agreement with Ganymede in Australia, and we're looking at the potential of sales in other areas, the rest of Canada, for example, California, Washington, Oregon, and even possibly Mexico. So we have we're now switching to the active entry. Now the method by which you do it starts on slide 84, and the first is direct sales. Okay, it was a direct sale with respect to the small order in Washington State. I can't remember whether it was Washington or Oregon, but it doesn't matter. It was a direct sale. It was a contact. We did the selling. if we decide, okay, instead of having a direct sale with a business because they contact us, let's seek them out. So we can send agents to do that. And we've sort of been doing that in British Columbia when our ski team instruction people go on a river rafting expedition. What they're doing is they're demonstrating our business and they're seeking out customers directly. So that's direct sales. If we do it internationally, then what you've got to do is you've got to fund your salesperson to go there and make the sales and come back. The other way you can do it is through agents. Okay, so rather than hiring people and sending them out, you actually work out an agency relationship where you have a representative that people in those other countries can contact, or they can actually seek out sales, and they receive commissions from the exporter, Peak Performance Pontoons. The agency relationship is described on slide 85. You have a principal that hires an agent to bring the principal into contracts with a third party. So in fact, in an agency relationship, you can see that there are two contractual arrangements. There's the contract between the principal and the agent, where the agent will get costs and commissions. And then there's the contract between Peak Performance Pontoons and Good Day Mate. To describe the agency relationship, I'm going to talk about a student that graduated. Vince graduated from our international business program, and then he came into my office and he put a cup of coffee on my desk and he put a donut there and he said, thank you very much for teaching me about business law. I want to get into international business, and I have no money whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I've got student loans. How can I do it? And so I said, well, okay, Vince, the easiest way for you to do that is become an agent, because then all you need is the price of the business cards. And then you go out and you schmooze and you hand out your business cards. He started to do that, and he came in contact with a woman, a nurse from the interior of BC, who was working with Alzheimer's patients. And Alzheimer's is devastating and horrible. Eventually, you forget so much that you forget to tell your body to breathe and you die. Long before that, though, a majority of Alzheimer's patients die not from that, but from the stress of an earlier episode. All of a sudden, they find themselves somewhere and they don't know who they are, they don't know where they are, and they don't know what they're doing there. And they suffer so much stress that they have a heart attack. Well, this nurse said, okay, this is somewhat like being a baby. Okay, a baby in a baby carriage. They don't know who they are. They don't know where they are. And they don't know why they are. Okay, well, what happens when a baby cries? Parents give them a stuffy. He hugs the stuffy, or she hugs the stuffy, and they calm down. So she began giving stuffies to the Alzheimer's patients when they had an episode, and their stress level reduced substantially, and she began saving lives. Well, all around the province, other nurses and doctors say, send us some of your stuffies. Like, any stuffy wouldn't do. Anyway, she thought, oh, okay, I've got a business opportunity here. And then she went to find out how much it was going to cost to have these stuffies made, and was appalled at the labor costs in the province of British Columbia. She also knew that she would be able to have them made far less expensively in the Far East, but she was a bit confused because to get to the Far East, you go west. So anyway, and I'm being a little facetious, she didn't know how to go about doing it. She was a good nurse, but she didn't know how to do business. So she had met Vince, and she decided to hire him as the agent. So she paid his costs, which means his flight, his hotel, his taxi, his food, and he flew to Hong Kong. But before he did that, he came back in my office and he gave me another cup of coffee and another donut. He says, okay, Smarty, I'm now an agent. I now have a client. I now have to go to Hong Kong and find a manufacturer. How do I do that? And the surprising thing was, he was a little taken aback when I told him that it was incredibly easy. I said, you get on a plane, you fly to Hong Kong, you get off the plane, you walk out and you ask a taxi driver to take you to the Vancouver or the Canadian Trade Office. They all speak English, so no problem. And then they go to the trade office and you talk to a trade officer and say, look, I need these dolls made. And he or she will take you out and introduce you to a couple of businesses and you choose one and bingo. And I got a call from Vince and he says, I'm in a bar in the hotel in Hong Kong and I'm schmoozing other business people. I am an international business agent. Thank you very much. Okay? The nice thing about being an agent is, of course, you get your costs paid for, hopefully, under that contractual arrangement. But then if the dolls get shipped from the manufacturer in Hong Kong to the nurse in BC and they are poorly manufactured and so there's a breach of contract situation, who does the principal sue? Well, the principal does not have a contract with the agent for the making of the dolls. The contract is with the third party. So only the third party can be sued by the principal. Conversely, if the manufacturer sends the dolls but the nurse doesn't pay, who does the manufacturer get to sue? Well, he doesn't have a contract with the principal. He only has a contract with the nurse, so he can only sue the nurse. So as long as you are very careful as an agent to make sure that you do not negligently represent your warranty of authority, then you have no legal liability. Imagine that, all the benefits of doing business internationally and no legal liability. So what do I mean by warranty of authority? I'm going to put it into the next slide. Warranty of authority means to be the agent, you get a letter of authorization. And you use that letter to say to the manufacturer, I have the authority to bring my principal into a contract with you. If for some reason the agent overextends the bounds of his authority, then he has negligently represented his warranty of authority and can consequently be sued for that. So that warranty of authority is particularly important. Now, all we have to do is apply that to a contract situation, or pardon me, a corporate situation where the corporation is coming into contracts with a third party, to realize that that's one of the reasons why the corporation has the limited liability protection that so many people want. But we'll get into that just a few slides from now, because we'll start talking about forms of business organization. Okay, so as a matter of fact, I don't even think I'm going to put in a slide on that here. I think I'm going to do that a little later on, so it would be more appropriate to discuss it when we talk about the corporations. Okay, so that's direct sales and agents. Now we're looking at foreign distributors, and hey, this is really important because this is exactly what Peak Performance Pontoons is going to be doing with Good Day Mate. On slide 66, there's a picture of British Columbia with Peak Performance there, and they have a sales contract with Good Day Mate, who happen to be in Australia, and they are going to distribute the products throughout that particular country. So the nice thing about the distributor is he doesn't go out and find a contract as an agent and then bring that buyer into a contract with Peak Performance Pontoons. They actually, the distributor actually buys the product from Peak Performance Pontoons, and so the sale is made. So they buy a whole bunch of skis and they find out they've bought too many. Okay, well, take them back and give us our money back. No, they've bought them. and the skis now belong to them, and Peak Performance Pontoons already has the profit, the sales. So that's foreign distributors. Is possible to enter into two types of distribution agreement. One is where the foreign distributor is distributing to a lot of businesses, a lot of different products, and yours is just one of them. And so they're not absolutely keen about becoming the exclusive distributor of your product. And so in effect, they just order whenever they want. Then you have the exclusive distribution arrangement where the G'day Mate says, oh, look, we want to really push your product, but we don't want to be competing with other distributors in Australia, so why don't you make us your exclusive distributor? And then Peak Performance Pontoons has an advantage because they can say, okay, if you're getting all the sales in that area, then what we want to do is we want to make sure that you pay us something for that. So I don't know, $50,000, $75,000, $100,000. That's a business aspect, not a legal aspect. So I'm not sure what they would sell for in a situation like this, but it would be something like that. Okay. And then if the product was really a hot product, G'day Mate might come back and say, okay, we want to have not only Australia, but we want to have New Zealand, and we want to have Southeast Asia, and then they pay you more and they get the distribution rights for that. So that's the foreign distributor relationship. The next one relates to pretty much China, Taiwan, Japan. They have trading houses, domestically based intermediators that market the goods in their country for businesses abroad. So the Japanese trading house, for example, will have a big convention in Vancouver, and business people will go down and they'll show the Japanese their products and say, we want to get into the Japanese market. And they assist. They handle foreign market research, transportation, appointing agents, exhibiting at trade fairs, advertising, and documentation. So they assist getting into a foreign market where there's language problems or tariff barriers or some other controls that make it difficult for people to do it directly. A lot of times, like Taiwan, for example, you can get into Taiwan if you want to do it yourself. It's just a learning curve. Japan, it's very difficult to get in there unless you go through a trading house. China used to be controlled by two trading houses that were British owned, actually. Jardine House and I can't remember the name of the other one. Really good books if you like reading about business. Taipei and Noble House, written by James Clavell. They're interesting and enjoyable reads, but they're also about a business topic, and it's kind of interesting. It gets into cross-cultural matters, cross-border trade, quite interesting books. I don't get a commission on the sale of the books. Anyway, those are trading houses. The next is licensing or franchising. Licensing is when, if Peak Performance Pontoons found that the Australian market it's going to be phenomenal, rather than go through all the transportation costs of shipping skis to the distributor and taking back skis that have been, damaged or in transit or whatever, they could say, okay, why don't we license someone to make our skis in Australia? We're confident of quality control because we can take care of that in the licensing agreement. We found a really good company. The fiberglass and other parts are readily available. So why don't we license them? And so that company would actually build them and sell under the trademarks of Peak Performance Pontoons, and then they would pay a licensing fee. Okay, Coca-Cola does that all over the world. Franchising, a little bit more control and less likely to be used for a Peak Performance Pontoons product where you're manufacturing it there. It's more in the food industry or the entertainment industry, like I show the McDonald's logo and the Vancouver Canucks logo. Those are franchise operations. And so what you do is you franchise someone to make your product and sell your product, and you have more control. Okay, the restaurant has to be red and yellow motif. It has to use the golden arches. You can control the products, the pricing to a certain degree, and things like that. Years and years and years ago, let's see, 1993, I think it was, I went to Vietnam to teach for Capilano Universities, as I mentioned in my opening lecture. And my wife and I went early, and we went into China and traveled around. And we went up to Beijing, and one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to go and see the Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant, because it was the first franchise to open a Western fast foods operation there. So I don't particularly like Kentucky Fried Chicken, but I thought, well, I'm going to buy a piece and eat it just so I could say I was there and did it. So we went to the location, and the lineup was out the front door and around the block of Chinese people that wanted to get in and have some Western fast food. So I didn't get in, but I took a picture of it, and I had it in my office for years up in my billboard. I took a year off to write my textbook, and when I came back, they had let somebody use my office while I was gone, and forgot to mention that I was only on a sabbatical. And so he took everything down, plus all my other stuff, and threw most of it away. So I lost my picture of the Kentucky Fried Chicken franchise. Oh well. Life's too short to worry about those kinds of things. So that's licensing and franchising. The other way is to go into a partnership or a joint venture. A joint venture would be a one-off type arrangement where, I can't think of a situation that would apply to Peak Performance Pontoons. Well, let's look at it this way. If there was a business there that was in the process of marketing whitewater sporting equipment, kayaks and river rafts and things like that, and they were going to put on a convention there, we might say, okay, we'll go into partnership with you, a joint venture, and we'll put on a convention in Sydney and Canberra and some of the other cities in Australia. But we don't want to be in partnership with them forever, because that exposes us to joint and several liability. But we would do it for those few ventures, those marketing ventures, and we have the risk of potential joint and several liability for those events. But then you get insurance to protect yourself, and there's other things you can do in the way of risk management to protect yourself. But that would be a joint venture. A partnership would be, let's do that marketing every year, and so we enter in an agreement for 10 years to do that marketing. Suddenly it's not a one-off, this is an ongoing event, and then it becomes a partnership. Or you could get into a partnership where we make skis for a business there, and they make, barbecues. Put another sharp on the Barbie, and we take their barbecues and sell them here, and they take our skis and sell them there. Okay, something like that. That would be a partnership arrangement. A subsidiary corporation is foreign direct investment. Okay, so Peak Performance Pontoons Inc., BC company, would have a Peak Performance Pontoons Australia Inc. down there, and all the shares of that would either be owned by Peak Performance Pontoons Inc., making it a wholly owned subsidiary, or the Peak Performance Pontoons Inc. here would own some of the shares, and we might have investors down there who own the other shares, and then it's a partially owned subsidiary. And what that does is we have a building there, and we begin manufacturing skis there and making the sales. That's has advantages. For example, you have control over quality rather than having to investigate quality with licensing. You get all the profits, but the disadvantage is it's incredibly expensive to set that operation up. Okay, So anyway, Starbucks is an example of that. There's a McDonald's franchisor that has all the locations that are franchisees. They are not owned by McDonald's. McDonald's controls them through a contract. They're owned by the business people that run them. Starbucks, on the other hand, looks a lot like a franchise operation, but it isn't. All their stores are corporate-owned stores, okay? And so when they started opening up corner coffee shops in China, every one of those was owned by Starbucks Corporation in China, which was owned by Starbucks out of Seattle, okay? So that's a foreign direct investment. A lot more control, a lot more profit, but a lot more upfront costs. And then you have the manufacturing problems in the sense that you have managers here that are well trained and have been doing it for years, and suddenly you're training new managers over there and trying to hire over there and trying to live within the employment laws of that country. So we could think of outsourcing in Mexico via foreign direct investment. Okay, we could start a corporation down there, but then we have all the problems of their labor laws and learning to live within their business environment. So we'll enter into a partnership. Hey, man, no, we don't want to be in partnership with a company down there, and so we would probably be looking at just a contract arrangement. Okay, not licensing someone to make the skis down there. No, we just want the parts made down there and sent to Canada. So what we'll do is just contract with another business to have those skis made. Our parts made and then sent up here and assembled. Okay, so that is all that we're going to say about topic number 6 and business entry strategies. Okay, now contracting with them isn't listed in that particular topic coverage because entering into a contract with somebody in another country is not entering their market. Okay, it's not a business entry strategy. Okay, it's just a contractual arrangement. Okay, now we're getting into topic number 7, and this is relatively straightforward and short too. It just fills in a gap in this whole process of us going globally, and that is the international standards for alien travel rights. Okay. So what are the rights? The people that travel have the right to expect the protection of local law, and they also have the obligation to obey local laws. So when you go to another country, and in Canada pot is now legal, marijuana, when you go to another country, you can't say, hey, listen, I can smoke pot because it's illegal in Canada, or it's legal in Canada. You have to look at the laws of that country. So don't go down to the United States and say, it's okay, man, it's legal, because you have to obey the local laws. All right, so 2 documents that are extremely important in travel is a passport and visa. And we think of a passport as the document we need to enter the United States. No, that's the visa. Okay, a passport is actually a document that allows us to leave Canada. Okay, so it serves as permission to leave the country, and it's a letter of introduction to the country from the issuing sovereign, us, to the other country that you're about to enter, and it vouches for the bearer's identity and allegiance. Okay, and it goes to the request that they be protected by local laws. The visa is a permission of a sovereign to enter into another country, and it's the visa that's kind of critical for peak performance pontoons, because if we start to sell our skis in Australia, we have to realize that we don't just say, here's a ski, go put it on and go down the river. We sell our skis with a lot of instruction. Quite often we actually take people and they try them. And then they go, yeah, that's kind of fun. Yeah, I fell a lot, but I'll get better. Okay, yeah, I'll buy a pair. Well, how do we do that in Australia? Well, send down our ski team, right? Well, can they enter the country for business? What kind of visa do they need? How long can they stay? If they leave for a day, can they go back again? All those very important things. So, passport, your right to leave, and an introduction to the next country with a request that they protect the people in accordance with their laws, and a visa is the permission to enter the country. Part and parcel with that, of course, comes the problem of clash of customs, and this is cross-cultural aspects of the going globally. Now, there's a whole course on that, and most of you will take it. I think it's IBUS 255, and I think there's also a business course that you can take, which is identical, but it's just under the business program. I don't think you can get through the program without taking it, but if you can get through, don't without taking it. Okay, it's a really good program. Okay, bribery versus gifts versus insults. We have a situation where on the international scale, I think there's some countries like European community countries, the United Kingdom, Canada, where bribery and corruption is frowned upon. It exists, but we try to combat against it. I used to include the United States in that, but we've got a president and a whole coterie of thugs around him who who go into bribery and corruption in a big way. Okay, and because the protections built into their constitution hadn't been thought through correctly, when the Senate and the Supreme Court of the United States and the President are all from the same party and all of the same corrupt background. I have to be a little cautious because not all the Supreme Court judges are like that. But then they, corruption runs amok. And you have to take that into consideration when you're doing business internationally. Years ago, I had a client. I just did local work for him because he was a Vancouver resident and had some businesses here. But he also worked as a representative for a Canadian hydroelectric company, and he used to go to China, and he would try to negotiate contracts. And I met him one time. We were having lunch. I don't know how he got onto the topic, but he said that he was hired because he was a Chinese Canadian and spoke the language and knew the customs. He was hired because he would know the right people to bribe so that Canada could get the contracts. And I sort of sat there and went, really? I was pretty naive about those sorts of things. And he said, yeah. He said, most Canadian businesses don't do well internationally because when someone says, well, give me a little put here, the Canadian would go, oh my God, I can't do that. And they'd go, oh, okay, well, goodbye. And then they'd go and give the contract to somebody else. So you have to take that into consideration of where you're dealing. I mean, Australia, they're up and, level. You can't bribe there. New Zealand, you can't bribe there. You get down into, Colombia, and if you don't bribe, you don't get anywhere. Even Mexico, which is fighting corruption to the best they can, it's built into their system. You get stopped by a police officer. I'm going to give you a ticket. Well, for what? For going through the red light. There's no red light here. Well, I'm going to, give you a ticket. And then he waits to see if you slip him a few bucks, in which case he says, okay, remember, don't go through any more red lights. You can go. I know that because it happened to us. I was traveling with somebody who every time I got pulled over, which wasn't very often, mind you, he would just have some money in his hand and he'd lean on the door sill of the window or of the car door, and the guy would come and he would talk to him for a few minutes, and then the fellow would just take the money and bingo, away you go. They're not all crooks, but there are some, and you have to. It's called mordida, the sting, and you have to take that into consideration when you're dealing internationally. there is a very good article which I will post to eLearn. It was usually in the package that I handed out, but it's called Canadian Firms Do Pay Bribes. They just aren't punished. And that was a few years ago. Things are changing. It used to be that we sort of thought, well, okay, if we're going to do business internationally, maybe we have to sort of, wear blinders and sort of let our business people deal with the customs of that country the way they deal with them, number one. And then number two, we didn't have the manpower in the RCMP to actually effectively go after Canadian companies and business people that were paying bribes. They have now assigned more and more people to that role, and they are actively and aggressively going after corrupt business people. So there's two aspects to this. There is the Corruption of Foreign Public Officials Act, which is a convention of the United Nations that has been adopted by most countries. And it says that you cannot pay a bribe to a foreign official. And we'll have a presentation on that, so I'm not going to say too much about it. That being said, a business person can be gone after in Canada for bribing a foreign official, but they can also be charged with an offense under the criminal code, okay, where it says bribery is an offense. We're still, if I have a corporation, I'm Bet and Counter, I have a corporation, and Myrtle Grogan, the marketing manager, goes to another country and pays a bribe or something, and the company gets charged with an offense, I, as the president, can get charged with an offense because the corporation is just a minute book, a binder with all the corporate documents in it. Well, you can't put the binder in jail. Well, you could, but what's the point, right? So the government's looked for somebody in the corporation to put in jail. And by that particular threat of punishment, they reduce the amount of bribery that's taken place. So there's the Corruption of Foreign Public Officials Act. There's also another statute by another organization, but the bribery team will probably talk about that. But they'll talk about that particular statute, and they'll talk about the criminal code. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk about cross-culture. Oh, sorry, next slide has the criminal code sections in there. Section 426 creates a secret commissions offense which prohibits an agent, including an employee from receiving or any person from corruptly offering or giving an agent an award, advantage, or benefit as consideration for doing or forbearing to do an act. Okay, and then Section 21 states the party means the criminal charge laid against the organization and any of its directors, officers, and employees who knowingly carry out the alleged crime. So it's the criminal code looks at it from the point of view of accepting the bribe. Okay, an agent from receiving or any person or from corruptly offering or giving an agent a reward. There is a difference. There are such things as facilitation payments, and the group will deal with that. For example, you want to lease premises, and you look and you say, okay, it's going to be about $60,000 to do the leasehold improvements. And the agent for the landlord will say, well, we could probably give you an allowance for that, $40,000 towards your leasehold improvements. And you say, yeah, okay, good, I'll take it. Well, it sounds like a bribe, but they call this a facilitation payment, okay? So you have to figure out what the dividing line is because you don't want to step over that line. All right, now this is an appropriate spot to take a break because I just want to grab my articles, which I will not post to the eLearn on some cross-cultural matters because I'm going to have a group, hopefully, that'll talk about that and they'll cover it themselves. But for the time being, okay, continuing with the discussion of grifts and bribes and cross-cultural considerations. At the bottom of screen 94, I've got a Dilbert cartoon there, and it shows the little pointy-haired boss saying, "I need you to go to Albonia and do some hand-holding while they cut over to the new system." And Dilbert says, "Because they're incompetent?" And the boss says, "And lonely," which is a bit of a joke. But in the next frame, it shows Dilbert in Albonia, and he's holding hands with an Albonian, and he's saying, "I'm not comfortable with this." And the Albonian is saying, "Mud wine?" And, ha ha ha, a real joke. Well, it's not actually all that funny of a joke, because I went to Vietnam, to Ho Chi Minh City, to the Open University on behalf of Capilano University, and we went to Saigon, part of Ho Chi Minh City, and we saw the university there, and then they took us to one of their outlying universities. And we arrived there in a van, and there was a group of us Canadians from Capilano University. We went into the library, and very politely, I began talking with the librarian because I wanted to find out what they had in the way of law books. I knew they had very little, and they were going to start a law program in the fall, and so I thought, well, perhaps we could provide them with some books. Anyway, so I expressed an interest, and everybody went off elsewhere to see the library, and I went with him back in the stacks, and he showed me the law books that he had there, and this was towards the end of my visit, and I'd already given them some law books, and there were my law books, and that was all they had, right? But I expressed interest, and I said I knew the books and everything, da-da-da. And then I hear, "Okay, Peter, it's time to go." And so I said to the librarian, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was enjoying this, but I'm afraid we have to go." And he took my hand, okay, and began leading me out of the library. Now, I had been warned that this might occur, and so I was saying, "Okay, I can handle this, I can handle this, I can handle this," because for Vietnamese people, a man can hold a man's hand. You see boys with other boys' arms around each other holding hands, as well as the girls doing it. And it's not considered to be untoward. It's a little disturbing for Westerners who are not used to that. But anyway, I was walking out and I said, "Okay, I can do this. I'm willing to do this." We were walking down the steps of the library, and of course, all the other Canadians at the bus were sort of going, looking at me. And anyway, we said goodbye and got in the bus and we were driving away, and one of the Canadian instructors leaned over to me and he said, "Boy, you're really a fast mover." Ha ha ha. But had I been, yanked my hand away or, punched the guy in the jaw, the relationship between the Open University and Ho Chi Minh City and Capilano University could have been irrevocably damaged by more than just the punch. So you have to get used to these customs, and I'll put 3 articles online, which I hope you have an opportunity to read. But one of them said you should do some work in advance because particularly people in the Far East expect you to investigate their customs before you arrive. Now there's a potential for translation problems, and you have to take that into account. When I went to the Ho Chi Minh, I was teaching at the university for a month, and all the students were expected to know English, and so there was no problem. But what I would do is I would put as much Vietnamese into my lectures as I could possibly handle, just to show that I respected the fact that I was in their country. They then had me go out to one of their factories, and I was expected to impromptu lecture to a group of employees, which is something that they do. They give business instruction to employees as part of the job. Anyway, I was talking to this group, and there was one of our lecturers there, an accountant who had been giving an accounting lecture, and so they said, "Oh, here's the expert, Peter Holden, who will continue with the accounting lecture." And I stood up and I thought to myself, I don't know anything about accounting. Anyway, what I did was I related the concept of negligent misrepresentation and negligent omission as one of the things that accountants have to be worried about. But the factory workers didn't know English, and so I had to do it through an interpreter. And this was this was rather interesting because I would stand up there and I'd go blah 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 blah, and the interpreter would go blah blah, and I'd sort of go, that's it. And then I'd go blah 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 blah, and he'd go blah 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 blah. And I thought, okay, there's a disconnect here. Anyway, I was finished and everybody, applauded and they were all very appreciative. One of the English-speaking people there came up to me and said, Professor Holden, I think you should be extremely careful about your interpreters. And I said, oh, why? And he said, because the man that was appointed as your interpreter was a very religious man. And he put a religious context on everything you were saying. And I thought, tortious problems in accounting representations, like how could you put religion into that? Anyway, you have to be very careful. I mention that because one of the articles talks about taking an interpreter. And sometimes it's also important to take what they call an introducer, somebody who knows the right people in that country and will then sort of grease the way for you and facilitate meetings. All right. Now, Asians take rank much more seriously than Westerners or Europeans. For us, it's let's make $1, and so I don't care if I'm talking to the vice president or the marketing manager or the president of the company. But Asians take rank very seriously, and this can be seen with respect to their business cards. In class, I generally have an exercise where I say to the students, okay, has anybody here got a business card? And somebody will say, oh yeah, I have one. And I say, yeah, I have one too. And I said, here, I'll give you one of mine, you give me one of yours, and we'd exchange them like that, right? And then I put it in the pocket. And that's what Westerners do, because the business card is merely a business tool which allows you contact information for the person that you were dealing with. Not so with Asians. It is their life. This is them. This is their rank. And so if you take the business cards and you say, okay, thanks, I'll call you later, they go, oh, you just insulted them. I knew about this ahead of time, okay, because I have quite a number of either Asian clients or Canadian clients from Asian countries. And I did some investigating. I was invited out to a fundraising gala dinner by one of my clients. It's an advertising firm that was predominantly Oriental people from the Orient. And we went to this fundraiser, and we were introduced at a table of 8 people, and we would exchange business cards. And I knew very carefully, or very completely, that I should hand it with both hands, because that's a sign of respect, and I would take their business cards with both hands, and I would look at the business cards, and I would be with the president of the company and the vice president of the company and a sales manager. I would put the president's card at the top on the table, never in my pocket. I put the vice president's card underneath it and the sales manager underneath that one, because that's their rank. Okay, and I would do that. And afterwards, the president of the company, marketing agency that I did work for, came up to me and he said, how did you know to do that? And I explained that I just had done a little bit of research ahead of time, and I'd also taught at the university covering this material. So the business card is very important. The article talks about things like if you arrive at a meeting in an Asian country, it's very appropriate to take your coat and your gloves and your hat off before you enter the room for the meeting. This is a sign of respect, because if you don't do that, then they take it as undressing in front of them, and it's very inappropriate. I never had that problem. Believe me, when I was in Vietnam, I did not have a coat and a hat and gloves on. It was blistering hot there. Let's see, time delays in dealing with Asia. I was an article student with a medium-sized law firm in Vancouver, Ray Connell Lightbody and Reynolds, and they were trying to establish a relationship and a partnership arrangement with a Japanese firm. And this had gone on for a long time. They would go over there, the Chinese or Japanese people would come over here, they would have meetings, they'd go out to dinners, and it really frustrated the lawyers, the senior partners, to the point where they finally said, well, we can't waste any more time, so let's dump them, and we'll try to do it with a firm in Taiwan. And they had the same problem. Things dragged on, and they were getting terribly frustrated because their Oriental counterparts didn't want to just, okay, let's have a partnership. Okay, great, yeah, let's get to business. They want to build up a relationship. They want to get to know you. They want to feel comfortable with you. And if you don't take that sort of time commitment into consideration, then you're going to step on toes and cause problems. The firm was very cognizant of the fact that they should have somebody that spoke Japanese, so they hired a lawyer who had actually spent a great deal of time in Japan, and he'd worked with some law firms over there, and the firm in Vancouver, Recon Levi Reynolds, thought he spoke Japanese. Well, yes, he did, but he didn't speak it very well or fluently at all. But he knew more than them. And so they hired this fellow. I won't mention his name, but he and I got along really well. And we went out one time, and he helped some Japanese tourists at the corner of Georgia and Hastings. Georgia Hastings, yes. No, Georgia and Granville. And I gave them directions. And I said, well, you speak Japanese. And he said, well, the firm thinks so. Okay. And he said, and the Japanese are very polite. When I try, they don't get upset about it. Anyway, they hired another lawyer because they thought he spoke Chinese, and they were trying to make this connection with Taiwan. Another funny episode about cross-cultural problems that happened there was I was working late one night. I'm just a lowly article student, okay? But the firm had managed to arrange a cocktail reception for the ambassador to Canada from France, okay? And it was a very, very fancy affair, and I'm working in my office, and suddenly the firm realized, oh my God, we don't have anybody that speaks French. And then they went, yes, Peter Holden, the article student. He's working late, and he used to live in Ottawa, and he was taking French lessons. And they raced down, and they told me to put on my suit coat and come down because they wanted somebody there that would speak French. And I was trying to explain as they were pushing me down the hall that, well, I didn't know that much. They pushed me into the room. I'm not kidding. They pushed me into this room, and they said, there's the French ambassador. Speak French at him. At him, Anyway, I went over and used the very little French I had to introduce myself and welcome to Vancouver, and I was hoping that he was having a nice time. And he just beamed. Qu'est-ce que c'est so blague? It's so nice to have someone that speaks my language. And he was shaking hands with me, and he put his arm around me, and he walked me over to a part of the room where there was no one else, and he said, you don't speak French, do you? And I said, only the little that I've managed to mutter. And he laughed, and he said, but it's so kind, and thank you very much. And he stood there, and he spoke with me for the longest time. Everybody else around was looking and thinking, isn't this just going wonderfully? And then he said, well, thank you very much. And they walked back over, and he was very polite to the senior partners about how nice it was to actually being able to use his family tongue with a person in Vancouver. And the partners then ushered me out of the room, like, you done your bit, out, because you're not part of the reception. And I went back to my office, and they thought they'd done, had an amazing job done there. And they were just so totally inept at cross-cultural matters that It's not surprising that they really didn't, manage to arrange any partnership agreements with other law firms in other countries, at least to my knowledge. Okay, so anyway, that's one thing. Now, this whole concept of time, I'm going to relate it to Mexico because I have spent a great deal of time in Mexico. As a matter of fact, I probably speak more Spanish than I do French. Anyway, so I was aware of the customs and this whole concept of mañana. It's a really laid-back place. That's why I like it. Nobody takes themselves too seriously, I don't think. But one of the problems you have as a business person dealing in Mexico is that you have these business meetings, and it's a very hot country, but they dress quite formally. They're used to the heat, for the most part, and so they will wear a suit and a tie, usually light colored, obviously, but a suit and a tie, and a nice short sleeved white shirt, and so you're expected to do that when you're down there doing business. I mentioned I took a year off to write a textbook. I was also given a term off to write an article, and one of the things I wanted to do was go down to Mexico to meet with some people from a civil law jurisdiction. So I talked to some professors at Guadalajara University. I talked to a judge from the Supreme Court of the state of Jalisco, and I wanted to talk to some lawyers. And so we arrived in Puerto Vallarta, and then we were going down to somewhere south of there, and then we were going to go to Guadalajara. And I was going to meet a lawyer in Puerto Vallarta, and we arranged it all ahead of time. We arrived there, and I went out to a restaurant where I was going to meet with him, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited. He didn't show. So I came back, and I got in touch with him, and his answer was, mia complico. Things got complicated. So we arranged to meet again, and I went, and I waited and waited and waited and waited, and he didn't show. So at this point I thought, well, okay, twice is enough, and we left and we went on the rest of our trip. Eventually I got up to Guadalajara to go and see the professors at the university, who were very helpful, and that's where this lawyer's law firm was from, and he contacted me at the hotel we were staying at, and he was very, very apologetic. Mia complico. Things got complicated again. And so he invited me down to the law firm, and when I got down there, we had a meeting, and it was extraordinary. He was extremely helpful, and not only that, but he went and he got some of the senior partners that came into the meeting and talked to me as well, and I gathered lots of really good information. But had I said, well, you missed 2 meetings, screw you, I would have missed out on that. But I understood this whole idea of how time is, and meetings aren't, they're important, but they're, if they miss them, they miss them, all right? Now, you have to remember that if they miss the meeting with you, that's okay. But if you miss the meeting with them, probably no chance of doing business. Okay, it's not a reciprocal sort of attitude. They expect foreign business people to meet with them, no problem at all. So there's that aspect to it. Let's see. Gift giving. I wanted to comment about that too, because gift giving is an important part of relationships, establishing relationships with people all the time. Whether it's European people, whether it's Mexicans, whether it's people in the Middle East, whether it's Asians. And the art of gift giving is, well, let's just put it this way. There is an art to it. When I was going to Open University in Ho Chi Minh City, the vice president of international relationships and the dean of small business was a lawyer by the name of Jessamine. And John Jessamine was an extremely dynamic person. And so when he asked me if I would go and teach at the University of Ho Chi Minh City, I was really excited about it. And he said, okay, what you're going to have to do is buy some little gifts to give to people. And he said, it's part of the custom. You have to give them gifts, and they'll probably give you some gifts when you're there. And then he said, and the other thing you want to remember is take over some law books, because their law library, or their library for business materials is non-existent. They're just starting up. The whole thrust of the Open University was to make connections with the Western world to help open the economy. But the government in Hanoi said, okay, you want to be a Western university, you bloody well take care of your own financing. And so it's like Kaplan University, when it was appointed a university, the government said, you're not getting very much in the way of financing, but you're a university. So they didn't have many books. And so he said, I want you to take over as many as you can manage. So I took over 3 textbooks. And he said, then when you leave them with them. He said, we're going to have to be really careful here, because if you say, oh, you don't have any law textbooks, here's some, then you will insult them. And so what I did was I said, oh, I've bought so many souvenirs, and I've bought Vietnamese coffee, and I don't have any room for these textbooks. Can you take them, because I don't know how I'm going to get them home. And they went, oh well, okay, sure. They took them, and those 3 plus I think one other they got somewhere else were the only law textbooks they had in their library when they were going to open up a law faculty in the fall and have 16,000 students. Okay, so things are a lot better now, of course. Back then, they were just opening up to the Western economy. So that was one thing. And then the other thing was gift giving. So he said, go out and buy some small gifts. So, and one of the things in the article it says is be very careful about the gifts you give. Don't give a clock to Orientals, because a clock means the impending, end of your life. Just ask Pepsi Cola about being careful. Pepsi, the drink of the next generation. The Pepsi fell flat in Vietnam because, and China, because what that meant was, drink Pepsi and you'll die. Okay. So anyway, I had to buy these gifts, and so he said, and one of the articles says, buy memorabilia, small, inexpensive things from your home country, okay? Don't take Vietnamese products to a Vietnamese person. That's like taking coals to Newcastle, where they dig coal out of the ground. So I bought these little gifts, and I gave my expense account to the university, who said, whoa, hey, we're not going to, compensate you for buying, gifts for people. And John Jessamine had to go to the university and go, hello, people, whack on the side of the head. We've got to have cross-cultural communications with these people. And one of the things is you exchange gifts. Peter's going there, and he's doing this not as part of his teaching. So we should compensate him. And so they reluctantly paid me for the gifts. Anyway, I had the gifts, and I'm heading over there, and John wasn't coming with me. I was going over by myself, and I said, so like, who do I give them to, and when do I give them to? And he said, I don't know, play it by ear. And that was it. So I wasn't sure. I mean, I knew that, president of the university I would give a gift to, but what about the other people, and when? So there was, a real learning experience for me. On the other hand, they gave me a gift upon arriving. Now, my wife went with me, and Professor Noga Gale from the university, I don't know whether she's still with us or not, but she was going over as well. And yeah, it was just the two of us, and I paid to have my wife go. And we arrive at the airport, and they're there to greet us, and they have a dozen roses for Noga Gale, and they have a dozen roses which they hand to me. And my wife's sort of standing there going, I like flowers. Flower giving for them was a gift that they felt comfortable with. But the gift was for me, because I was a professor that was coming to teach there. And they knew my wife was coming, but she wasn't part of the entourage, really. And now, had I not done investigating in advance, I would have thought, oh no, those aren't for me, they're for her. And I would have handed those to my wife, and that would have insulted them. Okay? So, yeah, you're tippy-toeing around. Now, usually the Asians are fairly forgiving in these circumstances, but you can, cause some difficulties. Anyway, while I was there, there was one other sort of event that happened that I really think we should talk about, and that is alcohol. After I was there, and after a couple of days, and then I went to the university, they said, we're all going out for dinner. So we went out to this floating restaurant, which is a boat tied up to the dock. And we get there, and there's a whole bunch of people from the university. There's my wife, there's Noga Gale. We have a lovely meal. It was wonderful. And then at the end of the meal, the president reaches under the table and he brings up a bottle of cognac. And he starts pouring little shot glasses. And they said, to friendship. And we go, yeah. And then they poured it again, and they said, to a long-lasting relationship between our universities. And then they filled it up again, and they said, Peter. And I had to give a toast, so I said, I can't even remember what I said, but then I had a third shot, and my wife leans over to me. She says, you don't drink, so, be careful. And so I thought, oh, yeah. And then they poured again, and somebody else made a toast, and so I just took a little sip. And they all looked at it, and they went, oh, so you don't believe in friendship between professors or something. And I went, oh, no. And I took it back. And then there were a couple more of those, and I was like, okay, I was in really bad shape. Anyway, the evening ends, and Kathleen and I went arm in arm to get off the boat, basically because that way she could support me. And she didn't have to drink because she wasn't a professor at the university, and she wasn't part of the entourage, so it was okay for her to just sit. Anyway, we get to the gangplank because it's a boat, and and I'm trying to figure out which of the three gangplank to go down. Okay, and had Kathleen not been with me, I would have been in real trouble. So that was touch and go. Okay, I didn't embarrass myself for the university. But when John Jessamine came about a week later, we're going out to the restaurant again. And, oh no, sorry, John Jessamine didn't come. It was another vice president from the university. Let me correct that. John Jessamine came, but then he was going somewhere else, so he dropped off the people. And so I grabbed John and I said, John, listen, about the dinners, we're going to have another one. And what do you do about the brandy? I mean, they just, they keep drinking. And he says, he said, he'll bring it out and he'll put it on the table. And, you have a few drinks. And when you're done, he said, you take the bottle and smile and put it down on the floor. And that's in your indication that you really appreciated what was done, but you don't want to drink anymore. And he said, and I went, okay, I wish you'd told me that ahead of time. Well, we went out to the restaurant again for the new group of people that came over, and we were going through the whole thing again, all the same toasts. Well, this time I was really smart. We're sitting like it's an open deck, right? And so I sat right up next to the rail of with my back to it, and they would, like this. So the first one I drank, I watched everybody, and they really go like this, right? So next time they poured it like that, and everybody goes like this, I went like this. And I shot it over the side of the boat. So I did 5 or 6 of those. Now I know I'm supposed to take the bottle off and put it on the floor, but I'm watching the vice president of the university, and he's whacking these things back, and he's trying to figure out, how is he going to stop this? So after a while, I thought, okay, he's really, really had too much as well. And so I reached over and I grabbed the bottle and I smiled and I put it on the floor, and that was it, okay? But the vice president was even worse off than I was. And the next day we were piling into the van to go down to the southern campus. And that was where I held the hand of a fellow that was in the library. And the vice president came out, and he was just He came out to get on the bus, and he went, oh, and he turned around and he went back in. And he came out to get on the bus, and he went, oh, and he turned around and he went back in. Took him 3 times to finally get in the bus. And all the way down there in the heat of this thing, he was like, oh. So you have to be extremely careful in those situations that you do your homework ahead of time and you understand what you're supposed to do. Okay. There is, the last thing I want to mention is there is an article there written by a woman who was doing business in Mexico, and she was negotiating, and she found that there was no problem in the fact that she was a female, but she was a little disconcerted by the fact that there seemed to be quite a bit of flirting going on. And this is a no-no in our culture to the nth degree. In Mexico, though, it's considered just part of the relationship. They mean nothing by it, but they do flirt. And the other thing is you have to realize, when it's appropriate to bow, when it's appropriate to shake hands, or when it's appropriate to, embrace. And in Mexico, very quickly, if they get to know you, the next time they see you, they're going to shake your hand and they're going to give you a big hug, okay? And my wife and I have a place in Mexico. We go down there every year. Our kids went to school down there, and so we became part of the community more so than other Canadians that were visiting. And so we know people down there, and they Señor Roldan, okay, muchas gracias, amigo, lots of hugging, and you have to be willing to accept that. And we do that sort of with relatives up here, but seldom with, business people. Okay, let's see. I think that's about all I wanted to say, because my team that is going to do the cross-cultural presentation will be covering this. And just a heads up for whoever is on that team, I don't want I think there's a Hofstede whole system of power distance and other factors and the corruption index and things like that. From there, we have to learn that academic material so that we understand the things that I've just talked about. But when your boss says, okay, I'm going into Mexico, or I'm going into China, or I'm going into Australia, I don't want to step on anybody's toes as far as cross-cultural considerations are concerned. What should I do? I don't want the Hofstede. The power distance between a Mexican and a Canadian is 12, whereas a power distance between a Canadian and Canadian is a 3. Because that doesn't tell me what to do. What I want to do is, I walk in the door, I shake hands. Do I give a gift to the wife of the fellow, or or will we go out to restaurants, which they really, really like to do? Okay, I've got to make one more comment about restaurants and things. You have to be really careful about gift giving, that you don't give too expensive an item. My very first job as a lawyer was with a sole practitioner who had so much work he wanted to hire another lawyer. And he was a Canadian, but he was from China. And he took me out for sushi because he wanted to see what I would do if I had a situation where I was going to meet with a business person and actually eat something that was a little unusual. And this was years ago when, sushi wasn't common. There wasn't a sushi store at every corner. And I love it, so that was no problem. But then because he had taken me out, I should reciprocate, right? And so I invited him and his wife over for dinner at our place. You have to realize that my wife is a consummate entertainer. She put on a spread like you would not believe, okay, and didn't think anything of it. The lawyer and his wife were just very pleased, and they had a very nice time, I think. But then the lawyer thought, okay, I have to do better than that. Okay, and so he actually took Kathleen and I out to the most expensive restaurant in Vancouver to repay us for that dinner. So you don't want to do those sorts of things. So a nominal gift is appropriate, okay, because then they can give you a nominal gift back, and that's the end of it. But you have to be very careful about those kinds of things, because I didn't understand that, okay. But as far as that lawyer was concerned, he had to do that. A last comment: something as odd as just the color of the wrapping paper, which we don't really think too much about. You have to think a great deal about. A nice, something, a little gift wrapped in black with a black and white bow. That's a funeral gift, and things like that. So you have to be very, very careful. All right, that's enough of that. The next screen just shows the issues that come into cross-cultural communications. There's cultural norms, which differ from place to place. There are religious differences, okay? In the Middle East, for example, because it's very clear that you always shake hands with the right hand, and you always hand things to people with your right hand. It actually mentions that in some of their religious doctrines, whereas it's not as serious for us. There's political and philosophical differences that are the spectrum. There's economic philosophy, there's educational differences, there's obviously language differences, and there's social and structure differences as well. So those are the factors that come into play. There's something about language that I wanted to mention. But anyway, that's sufficient for our purposes for this class. It shows you, this section shows you how, or the topics show you how business entry strategies fit into the legal concept, and how cross-cultural strategies or issues fit into the culture of doing business across borders. Okay, so that finishes off Chapter 7. The next topic will be Chapter 8, and that is forms of business organization. Thank you very much.